Hello vlog, we are back for another week. Woohoo. Sorry I'm not as excited this week. I'm ready to go home. I'll just be honest with you. Alright, so this week we talked about autism, and one of the things that I honestly had no idea about was that PDD, Rett syndrome, childhood disintegrative disorder, and Asperger syndrome are actually not considered types of autism or just disabilities in general anymore. I work at an ABA clinic during the summer, which obviously has its pros and cons. However, at the top of their thing, their data sheets, it says what they're diagnosed with, and I a lot of them must have been diagnosed before it was changed, because a lot of them have PDD written on the top, or what's the other? I don't remember what the other one is. However, I've seen PDD written on a lot of them, and Asperger's, and so it's interesting to me that now there's autism level 1, 2, and 3, just because I feel that's a very different kind of thing. And it was interesting when we were talking about it this week, looking at how that might affect students IEPs in their classrooms, whether or not they're able to get the same types of accommodations because of this new change. So one thing that we talked about this week was what kind of things that you have to have or be diagnosed with to fit into the categories of autism. And so some of them are the social communication interaction, as well as restrictive and repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. And just kind of thinking about that, I know that working in an ABA clinic, there are some things that I've really disagreed with in treatment of what we should be fixing, because as we've talked about in class, every single behavior of any type, whether it's or disruptive, has a purpose. And so looking at what that purpose is beneficial to understand why a student is doing that, and what they're trying to get out of that. So whether it's flapping of arms, or whether it's moving back and forth, or spitting or something, there's always a reason for that, whether it's stimulus, or escaping an activity, or anything like that. So one thing that I've noticed in ABA is that some of these behaviors, they're oh, they should not be doing this, when it's flapping of the hands, and it maybe distracting. However, if it's just for a stimulus and it's just something that they need, I just don't necessarily know if that's worth it and beneficial, if it's going to cause a lot of behaviors to get rid of that behavior in a student. And so I've definitely disagreed with my supervisors on what should be changed in a student's behavior management plan or something like that. And so that's just one thing that I've experienced personally with ABA. Also, when you're looking at the diagnostic criteria for autism, a lot of the things that are on there are just things that we have decided as a society are supposed to happen, that you know, a child is supposed to make eye contact, and that's why we say they have autism. And I'm not saying that you don't have to you know, check off a lot of these other characteristics. However, it is interesting to see that a lot of these things are social norms that we just expect out of children, and we expect out of people in general. And I totally recognize that you know, a lot of these things, being able to have conversations with student, or with peers and other people, or being able to handle these situations are important for people of all abilities. However, I think sometimes we can focus too much on the little things, and say that it's a bad thing if a student is not able to do that, isn't able to make eye contact with a student, or not smile back at someone when maybe they're just having a bad day and they don't want to do that. And again, you know, it could be not being able to recognize the feeling and the emotion that goes with smiling, and that's a very different thing. However, I know I have bad days and I don't want to smile at people, and I just don't, and that's just what it is. And I think we should allow for students to be able to have that opportunity to be themselves and not have to worry about if they're meeting like the standard or the criteria. Because sometimes I feel like even when we will like teach students with autism, like, oh, when someone smiles at you, you're supposed to smile back. Like, is that just teaching like a habit though, and like they still aren't like recognizing the emotion and like the feelings that are going along with that? Because if so, then that's not even like beneficial, and that's not even the point of teaching them those social cues. The last thing that I wanted to talk about for this week's vlog is the activity that we did on Thursday, where we were like cutting the paper and like putting it underneath the categories. I thought that was really interesting because, like, as Sarah mentioned in our class, we kind of thought the whole point of it was that you were gonna say, oh, well, there's no concrete answer and like it all goes together. But I just like still like every class, I think I'm like really like excited and like happy to see how much it all like goes together, because like I just think we have this like standard way of looking at things a lot of times when it comes to education, and education just isn't a standardized thing. And that's why I really appreciate special education in general, because it's not something that like you just do the standards and you make a lesson plan and it's going to work for every single student. You have to think about like how to make your lesson plan work for every single student. And like when you think about like these different types of therapies and these different types of ways to help students, like we have to think about how to help every single student, and not everything works for just a specific person, and not everything is just under one specific aspect of education. And I think that's like really important as a teacher to recognize and to put into like your teaching philosophy. At least for me, I think that's like my main thing, is that like when I'm thinking about how I'm going to be teaching a lesson, I want to make sure that it's something that every single student can access, and it's something that no matter what's happening, I'm able to help all of my students. So thank you for coming to this week's vlog. I will see you Tuesday.